Mina, can you do that? Are you starting? Can you do this? We're just adjusting the slides. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. We're going to go ahead and start. This is the servant preparation 4, which is the first lecture of the church history. When you look at the link we have for the Christian education program, you have several sections. We started and did the New Testament, and we spent about 3 lectures for that. And then this is going to be the 4th lecture for the servant preparation program and the Christian education program. At church history, there is a syllabus in the link. And that syllabus, I went over it, and I found out that there is probably 50% of the information, I view it as far as the servant's concerned is relevant. And the other 50% is good information, but it's not as relevant as I would like to add other information. So what I'm doing is I'm using other resources, other legit resources for the history of the church, and combining them together in this slide presentation. Your main source of knowledge is going to be the lecture and the slide presentation for now. But I'm trying to compile a syllabus. And that syllabus, I'll do it, and it will be a combination of the Christian education program syllabus and the articles and the resources that I am basing the church history about. So the lecture has all the information probably that we need, but a syllabus that I'm writing is going to come later, and we will distribute it to the servants. I'm going to mention things that is going to be like difficult in the beginning, but as we go in the church history, lecture 2, lecture 3, and probably lecture 4, because I don't think 3 lectures is going to be enough for the church history. As we go into those 4 lectures, all that stuff is going to make sense. One of that stuff is the ecumenical councils. Do you know what the ecumenical council is? Anyone? It's the councils of the bishops, and what is it made for? What is the reason for the ecumenical councils? And what's the definition of ecumenical? Why do they call it ecumenical? It's because it's international. It's involved in the whole Christian parish. It's not only Egypt or the Church of Alexandria. It's not the Church of Antioch. It's not the Church of Rome. It's all the churches together agreeing about something and trying to make a decision about something that is important at that particular time. As you can see, it's not done every year. We have, in the whole church, we have 7 essential ecumenical council. The first 4, our church participated in. And then 5, 6, and 7, we did not participate because they are done by other churches that we, at that point, did not belong to. We belonged to all together as one ecumenical church until the Council of Chalcedon in 451. And that's when schism of the churches has happened. Because at that council, we disagreed. We did not agree together. But the Council of Nicaea in 325, the Council of Constantinople I in 381, the Council of Ephesus in year 431, and the Council of Chalcedon in the year 451. Those are the 4 we participated in. There will be references of those councils as we go on, over and over and over until we get it down and we know exactly what we're talking about. But for now, I'm just listing the 7 main church, the whole Christian church, ecumenical councils. There's also other many small councils done by the Roman Church and by the Constantinople Church, but they are not really ecumenical. They are small councils. Something you need to know about the Church of Alexandria. You know, Egypt now is a developing country. It's a small country. It's a poor country. But imagine now Oxford and Sorbonne and Harvard and Columbia and Yale and all those big educational centers that the world recognize in Cambridge, you know. Alexandria was that. Alexandria for the first 7 centuries, Alexandria was the light of education, not only in Egypt, was the light of education in the whole world. It was a resource, it was a reference. So the Church of Alexandria developed in a most educated and most documented and most legitimate educational environment in the whole world. It was a reference. The Church of Alexandria, the Library of Alexandria harbored all, most, if not all, the important scripts and manuscripts and the education regarding religion, regarding the pharaohs, philosophy, the chemistry, the engineering, the building of the temples, the building of the pyramids, all the secrets of how to save the dead bodies were there in the Church of Alexandria. And unfortunately, the Church of Alexandria vanished with a series of multiple events that we are going to talk about in the description of the church history. It was not only a source of education and intellectual life, it was also a source of political culture. And we will talk about that more. The Church of Alexandria bishops presided over the Nicene Council. It was the Pope, or let's say the Bishop of Alexandria, was the president of the Council of Nicaea, and the Council of Ephesus, and the First Council of Constantinople. Bishop Alexander, you notice that I'm saying bishops, there is no Pope. There was no Pope. And at that time also there was no patriarchs. It was the Bishop of Egypt, was the Bishop of Alexandria. His name is Alexander. And you remember Alexander in the Nicene Council? Anyone remembers who was a prominent figure in that council? It was a deacon, a young deacon, 18 years old, Athanasius. And Alexander took Athanasius under his wing, and he took him to that council. And Athanasius was the one who presented the case of Arius and the heresy of Arius at that one. Bishop Timothy in the Council of Constantinople I, and Bishop Cyril in Ephesus Council in 431. You heard about Cyril? Who's Cyril? Pillar of the Faith. And he's here. You find his icon inside, and he's holding a book in his hand. And Cyril was an utmost student of Athanasius. So the first, second, and third ecumenical councils was led by the Alexandrian bishop. Now, the history of the Coptic Church starts with Saint Mark. Something really strange that you need to know. Until the end of the 2nd century, the first 200 years, we don't really have a lot of account and details of what happened. We have names of bishops, but we don't have a lot. History did not give us much. The one who is researching the Alexandrian history in most details is Father Eusebius. And his name was mentioned in the New Testament. education. He's the one who had done a lot of studies about the apostles and the disciples and the people who wrote the Gospels and the letters of St. Paul, St. Peter, St. John, etc. So he's a well-known historian, and he did not find much other than names of people. But he did not find a lot of details. After the 2nd century, at the beginning of the 3rd century, there's many, many, many details that he was able to report. In this lecture, I want you to know why he did not have a lot of information. Until the latter part of the 2nd century, there was no accurate accounts about the Alexander bishops other than their names and some minor events. I will list them quickly. The bishops of Alexandria. Ananias. Have you heard about Ananias? Who ever heard about Ananias? No, he's the one who met St. Mark when he was on his way to Egypt, from Judea to Egypt. And then St. Mark had problems with his sandals, so he went to Ananias, who was a shoemaker, and then something happened, an accident in his hands. Yeah, I mean, there was an accident, and St. Mark healed him. So St. Mark started the preaching of Egypt through Ananias. And Ananias became the first official bishop of Egypt following the martyrdom of St. Mark. I'm not sure St. Mark was a bishop because official offices were not really decided at that time, but he was like the bishop or a patriarch or a pope, whatever you want to call him. He is the one who started the Christianity in Egypt. He's the one who preached the Christianity in Egypt. And as you know, St. Mark was a disciple of who? Two apostles. And he learned from them. He was the disciple of Peter and Paul. Actually, they liked him, so they were fighting about him. Peter wants Mark, and Paul wants Mark, and then there were debates. A lot of details. But after he finished getting educated and escorting Paul and Peter, he went on his own. There's a lot of good stories about it, but this is not where to talk about. So he is the one who, do you know anything else about St. Mark? Who was St. Mark before that? Who was St. Mark before that? Anything you know about St. Mark before Egypt? You see this icon? Yeah, what happened? The Holy Spirit descended where? In the upper room. Yeah, they call it the upper room. The upper room where apostles gathered, and actually the upper room is where Jesus and Mary stayed, and the apostles gathered there, and they talked about things, the Marians. So it was a gathering room for the beginning of the 3 years of Christ's priesthood. So Ananias, that's the name that we need to know. But others, we'll just mention quickly. Avilius, Sardon, Primus, Justus, Eumnus, Mark II, Seldion, Agrippin, Julian, and then following Julian, Eusebius reported more details about the Alexandrian bishops from then on. And that's about the end of the 2nd century, because Julian reigned from 179 to 189 to 190. When we have a slash, it means that the history is not sure, 100%. If it is this year or the year after, okay? I'm putting asterisks on some bishops because we're going to discuss more about them as we go. And there are stories. They're not going to just discussing. There are stories. And through those stories, you're going to get some light about the history of the Alexandrian Church. Demetrius from 189/190 to 233. And then Heraclius, and then Dionysius, we'll say something about him later, Maximus, Theones, Peter the Martyr, who was the seal of the martyr from 300 to 311, only 11 years because he died in martyrdom, Achilles, and then Alexander is a prominent bishop. We already mentioned him. He's the one who presided which council? The Nicene Council, very good. Athanasius followed him as the Bishop of Alexandria. He was his disciple. He's the one who introduced him, so he became the bishop elected by the church. And then Peter II, Timothy, Theophilus. And then after that, Cyril, the pillar of faith. And then following him, Dioscorus, from 444 to 451. That's when the Chalcedon Council. And then after that, list of the bishops of Alexandria. I don't have to read all of them, right? So far, do you have any question? Because I'm going to pause here. And do you have anything that comes to your mind that you want to ask? What's that? No, microphone.
Neutral is next to a couple. What does that mean?
What's that?
The word neutral is next to a couple of them. What does that mean?
I'm glad you reminded me. No, I need to make a comment on that. Thank you. So I mentioned Cyril, okay, who presided the Third Ecumenical Council, right? And we will know in the church history also what he was talking about and what is the council was about. It's all interesting stuff. And then following him is Dioscorus. Dioscorus is the one who was involved in the Chalcedonian Council. Essentially, the Alexandrian Church اتبهدلت. Yeah, the word اتبهدلت في الكونسل ده. Why I'm saying that? Because I read the minutes. And I read it. It's in a book. The minutes are very well illustrated in a book called Cyril of Alexandria. And it's talking about Cyril, life as a person, as a bishop, as a theologian, and what are good things in his life, and what is the bad things in his life. And the book is very, very well written. So many references. I can tell you more than 3,000 references in that book. It's written by a historian called Norman Russell. So it's called Cyril of Alexandria by Norman Russell. And I read the minutes and everything that happened in that meeting. It's about 35 pages of sad story of what happened. It's all a combination of theological mistakes and political power and dominance and piracy of powerful people on weaker people and bullying. The meeting was not nice. The meeting was not nice. It was not really the ecumenical council that you would say, this is a church council. When you read that council, you'll see, essentially, الكنيسة بتاعتنا اتبهدلت. But humans cannot do anything to humans. It's only God who is the judge. So in that council, in the Council of Chalcedon, the church split into Miaphysites and Chalcedonians, or Biphysites. So it's about the nature of Christ, or the nature of God. Does he have two natures, or one nature? The Miaphysites believed in one nature, and the Chalcedonian Council disputed it. But when you look really at the details of the ideology of the Miaphysites and the Chalcedonians, and you think about it, you yourself, you will find out that there is no difference. Because the difference cannot be comprehended. I have been studying theology for many, many years, and I try myself to find out what's really the difference between the Miaphysite philosophy and the Chalcedonian philosophy, and it was hard for me to really understand. And if there's any difference, it's something that probably not applicable to our belief in Christ and Jesus Christ. So I don't want to talk too much about that because I don't want to be at any side. I'm just listing the history. And if I'm a historian or I'm doing history, I have to be fair to the history itself. And the history says it was more of a political fight than spiritual argument. So by no means it was spiritual at all. When you read the minutes, I mean, if you are really interested, I wish one of you is interested to buy that book. It's only probably $20. And it's called The Cyril of Alexandria by Norma Russell. Just read the minutes of that meeting. You will be surprised. You'll be not pleasantly surprised, sadly surprised. But you will know the background and how things work and how power can affect belief and can affect religion. So they called themselves the Miaphysites, and the others called themselves the Chalcedonian. So look at the line of the patriarchs or the bishops after that. Timothy Alurus, he is a Miaphysite. Timothy II Solophaciolus, he's a Chalcedonian. And then the next one is a Miaphysite. The next one is a Miaphysite. The next one is a Miaphysite. And then John II is a neutral. Dioscorus II was neutral. Timothy III was Miaphysite. So I talked about the schism, and I talked about the Council of Chalcedon that made the Christian world divided into Miaphysite theologians and Chalcedonian theologians. From the year 535 to the Arab conquest in the Middle East in the 7th century, there were two lines of Alexandria patriarchs by that time. Two lines. One line, it's called the Melkite line, which is a Greek Byzantine. They are Chalcedonians, and they are Chalcedonian supporters. And then the other line is the Coptic line, who are the Miaphysites or Cyrilline Christology followers. They followed Cyril of Alexandria's line. There are some bishops who are not Coptic in Egypt so far. Believe it or not, they started to call themselves patriarchs now. Because the other line separated, they don't want to be bishops, they became patriarchs. So the other line, the Coptic line, they said, we're not less than them, we're also patriarchs. But before that, they were only bishops. Is that funny? So they were all bishops in the whole world, and then people started to become patriarchs all of a sudden, and then popes. But that tells you that the rank of the bishop is the same as the rank of the archbishop, as the same as the rank of the patriarch, as the same as the rank of the pope. They are all one rank, which is bishop. All of them are bishop. But there is different status, different administrative responsibilities. But it's not different in the church line of ordainment. The bishop, the pope is a bishop, the patriarch is a bishop, the archbishop is a bishop, and the bishop is a bishop. Okay? Now, we mentioned a big segment of the church history, but we're going to focus on few segments, few patriarchs, because they have survived very important events. We're good in time, by the way. They have survived very important events. And those events we need to know about. We cannot know about every single piece of history, but what important need to be known, we need to study it. So we'll talk about some bishops and patriarchs. We'll talk about defenders of the faith, uh, people who are mastered in education, councils or committees. We talk about some heresies that affects our understanding and faith, about culture events, about education, and about political conflicts as well as some things that has to do with political control. I'll make it interesting, of course. I'll try to make it like a story. So, has anyone heard about Clement of Alexandria? We say his name in the praise, right? Clemens, yeah. He lived from 150 AD to 215 AD. That's what, 65 years? By the way, unfortunately, 65 years was kind of old in those days. The average age was much less than the average age we have right now. There's no cholesterol medications. There was no heart cath. There was no anti-hypertensive medications, you know. So we are kept alive longer because of that, because of the advent of the medical care. But the average age was not 85 or 80 or 75. The average age was 60, 55, 65, stuff like that. Okay, so the first one who demonstrated the understanding of the Logos theology. What's a Logos? Huh? The word or the mind. The Logos is the word and the mind of God. God you cannot see. You can see the mind of Christ. You can see the word of Christ. You can see Christ as the God incarnate, but you cannot see God himself. So Christ is the real image of God. Okay? And he talked about the Logos theology, the nature of Jesus Christ, the purpose of incarnation, why incarnation, and he established the School of Alexandria. In the time of Clement of Alexandria, Alexandria became the international reference of theological understanding of the event of the incarnation and the purpose of the Logos. So essentially, I'm telling you that right now, Alexandria, not only from the religious standpoint, but from the all scientific and literature, education, Christianity, religious, non-religious, Alexandria was the light of knowledge, not only in Egypt or the Middle East, but the whole world. Remember, the whole world did not include United States of America. So USA did not exist at that time. Oxford was Alexandria. Boston was Alexandria. Sorbonne was Alexandria. Those universities came later. They did not exist at that time. Or they did not exist in the fame they have existed at that time. Imagine Bishop Demetrius. He has a combination of religious power and political power. Imagine when a bishop takes control of a city of Alexandria. By the way, the city of Alexandria was the capital. It was the bulk of the power. It was Cairo with Giza and with the cities around it. At that time, Alexandria was the main city of Egypt. Everything else was a countryside, was a suburb. The city was Alexandria. It was that city. Even Giza was mentioned as Giza, but it was not a city. It was just plain fields. It was all cornfields or cotton fields or stuff like that. So Demetrius was so powerful, not only as a religious figure, but as a political figure, that he had political control of the city of Alexandria. Now, in his time, Clemens and Origen were the two founders of the School of Alexandria, of theology and liberal arts. And Origen, at that time, became the lightning rod for Christian theology, not only in the Middle East or Egypt, but all over the world. So remember the name Clement and then Oregon followed. Oregon from 185 AD to 253. He also founded the School of Alexandria. He was the chief architect of the allegorical method of biblical interpretation. Anybody knows what's allegorical method? Allegorical method? I'll give you an example. Jesus Christ was preaching on the mount. He sat down. Allegorical. Yeah, no, it's close. You're close. Matthew said analogy. Allegorical method is putting you there. You are there. And what I'm trying to say is that imagine Jesus Christ was sitting on a stone or on something on the mountain, maybe on a higher, and then people are down. The history describes thousands and thousands of people were listening. He's one person. How can the voice transcend? So I'm saying, no way. Everybody heard Jesus as if he's next to them. So allegorical method of Bible interpretation goes that way, that you have to think. For example, the lady who entered the house of the Pharisee wanting to meet Christ because she was a sinner and wanted to wash his feet with the most expensive fragrant oil. Imagine. Now I'm saying, guys, that's not simple. She's a sinner. Everybody knows that she's a sinner, and she's going to place of a Pharisee's house. Okay? And then she's knocking on the door. It's okay. She's knocking on the door, and she's saying, I want to meet Jesus. And somebody will tell her, no, you don't deserve to come to this house. You're not invited. So for her to go from the door and go to all those obstacles until she sees Christ, now I know something different about the interpretation of the Bible. I'm interpreting the story of that lady in a different way. I'm not starting with her at his feet. I'm starting with her at the door of the Pharisees. And I am telling you more about this lady by interpreting what happened. You see? So Oregon was master of that. And a lot of people who are interpreting the Bible right now don't even know that they are adopting his method or methodology of interpreting the Bible. He has interpreted the majority of the Bible. Or the scripts at that time, because the Bible theoretically was not really officially decided on, but there were many scripts that were available, written by many disciples and apostles. So he put the interpretation, because those people who wrote it died a long time ago, so he put his own interpretation. A lot of people who are great minds in the Coptic or Alexandrian church, or all the churches, has been inspired by Origen's writing. That includes Athanasius, Gregory, Cyril, Basil, and other great minds. That's the sad part of Origen's life, is that he was referred to as a scholar. He was never referred to as a father or as a saint. And I'll tell you why. He was at the time of Demetrius, Bishop Demetrius. And as I told you, Bishop Demetrius was very powerful, very influential. He took the control of the church, the city of Alexandria. He's the one who introduced Origen. He brought him, took him under his wings. He had a mesmerizing relationship between him and Origen in the beginning. And then the history is fair. They don't want to take anyone's side. And it mentioned that sentence. The sentence I'm quoting, it says, quote, various factors eroded their mutual goodwill. That's it. People who are accurate historians did not say anything but that. Did not take anybody's side. And then when Demetrius seized internal control within the city of Alexandria, and in addition to the well-known conflict with Oregon, Oregon was eventually led to the dismissal, and he was dismissed and was relocated in Caesarea of Palestine. Unfortunately, he was also subjected to a torture that we're not going to talk about. He was subjected to the Decian persecution, and he was injured and eventually died in the year 253. And he died as a scholar. He did not die as a saint or as a father. A couple of bishops were asked to reconcile him with the church, and they couldn't do it. So a couple of bishops came after he died, and they were asked to reconcile him again with the church and make him what he deserves to be, and they could not do it. A lot of details, but this is not the way, this is not the time to mention. Bottom line is, for the Alexandria Church, Oregon is a scholar. For other churches, Oregon is a saint, and Oregon is a father. And he is hailed and preached by other churches. So, but as far as the Alexandrian Church, because of what you just heard, this is facts of the matter. Now we're talking about the Edict of Decius. Edicts mean amr, qarar, okay? The Edict of Decius, Decius was an emperor. And the edict, see what happened? 250 to 251, it's a little over a year. And it was delivered in January of 250 AD. Luckily, with the mercy of God, it was short-lived. It was only a little over a year. What happened in the edict? The edict decided that any Christian or even remotely suspected as a Christian has to show a certificate, and the certificate tells that somebody give you a written certificate that you already denied Christ and you worshipped and you raised incense to the gods. They called it the Egyptian gods, but I differ with whoever wrote the word Egyptian gods. It was gods mainly of Greek, Roman ancestry, and they called it Egyptian god because they said simply it was gods in Egypt. But it's not the Egyptian gods of the pharaohs and stuff like that. Historically, that was not accurate, but sacrifice to the gods, to idols. And if you are, for example, was talking to a Christian, so it's assumed that you are Christian until proven otherwise. So they take you and you go and get the certificate. If you don't get the certificate, then you go to another pathway. What's the other pathway, guys? What do you think? What's the other pathway? Go to a certain series of torture. And the series of torture was actually planned. You start with this, and you go to this. And you go with the least, like talking, and then some torture, and then more torture, and then more torture, and eventually they die. Some of them don't die. Some of them are left handicapped, and some of them are left with a disability or a disease, and they eventually die after that. Okay, so the people who died, we call them the martyrs. And the people who did not die and left with a handicap, we call them the confessors. Confessors, okay? And those who escaped persecution, they did not get persecuted at all. The history tells us that he either bribed or paid money for the soldiers that were coming to seize them, or the people who are highly esteemed, rich, in a lot of power, nobody could touch them, stuff like that. So there were martyrs, confessors, and people who escaped persecution. But there is another category of people. Who are they? Anybody knows? Are you paying attention? There are martyrs, there is confessors, and there is people who escaped persecution. There is a fourth category that we're leaving. People who deny it. What do they call? What did they call them? Do you know? Huh? Uh, they called the lapsed. Lapsed. So the confessors are people who are tortured physically in public, people who were even without a permanent damage, or people who were permanently injured from torture, or people who were disabled from torture, people who were intentionally blinded. There was some states in Egypt that the governor wanted to blind all of them, like to do something. So they put a very hot object to the eye, so the eye would be essentially boiled. So they called the confessor. But there was a lot of them that we think confessors mean blind, but no, confessors, anyone who had a permanent handicap as a result of torture. Those are the confessors. And then so now we come to the time of Dionysius that followed the edict of Decius. And Dionysius, you remember when I mentioned the bishops in the beginning? Dionysius was the third one, okay? Like the third one and the one that I put the asterisks. And Dionysius, in this time, he was a very educated, very liberal, very intelligent, and he's the one who developed a pathway to reintroduce the lapsed. Those are the lapsed who denied Christ. But after the persecution is over, which only lasted a year, they wanted to come back to the church. So he had his own synod within Egypt, and they introduced, because it happened in Egypt mainly, they introduced a way or a pathway for the lapsed. Essentially, people who are Christianized at that time, they usually, have you ever heard about how the people who wanted to become Christian, what is the beautiful way that they became Christian at that time? They come to the liturgy and they leave after the Bible. Because after that is for the faithful, liturgy of the faithful. So they leave, but they get all the education. They get the matin, they get the readings, they get the sermon, then they leave after that. All year long, they attend all the feasts, all the celebrations, they attend this and that, and then they live in the church, the life of the church for a whole year. And at the conclusion of the year, which is the Easter or the resurrection, they become baptized. They become baptized. And that's what the pathway for all the Christians who wanted to, all the people who wanted to be Christian. It was beautiful because you live the life for Christ for the whole year. You go to the birth of Christ, and you go to the celebration on the temple, and the celebration of like going to Egypt. And then all those celebrations, all those feasts, they attend in the church, they are part of it. And they live the life with Christ a whole year. It's like born with Christ, died with Christ. So at the resurrection, they die with Christ, and they get baptized, and then they live with Christ, and they raise with Christ as Christian, as a new Christian. So it was beautiful. So now the lapsed, I'm coming to the lapsed, guys. Guys, it's so interesting. You're missing a lot, by the way. The lapsed, now they want to be Christian. So they said, okay, we will have them do this, and then we will ask them to fast from midnight until the sunset of the next day for the week of the Holy Week, starting Tuesday. And they call that what? The Lent. Yes. That was the first Lent, and they called it the Lent. The Lent of the lapsed. And they started to do the Lent for the reasons for penance, for people who wanted to be forgiven for something bad they did. So Lent becomes a practice now. So they called it Lent. That's when the first word. And then after that, Lent became the Lent. But after many years, like a few hundred years. The church synods met and they decided to do this, and then they added this and they added this until we have right now. Now we're 55. God knows how many days it's going to be like in 200 years from now. Sorry, it's just a joke. People who love fasting and Lent is not going to like what I'm saying right now. So the confessors had an important role on the lapsed. The confessors were brought by the church to pray on behalf of their weaker co-religionists. See, somebody who's really weak and somebody who's really strong. This one suffered almost to death, and this one denied Christ. So the people who suffered almost to death prayed and prayed for them, for the church to accept them. They had a very important role, the confessors. So Dionysius also, because he was such an open-minded guy, his reign was called the reign of prosperity of the church. He entertained experiments with writing the Egyptian language with Greek letters, with a few Demotic additions. Those are all what you read in the Tasbihah. They are all Greek letters except for couple, because the Egyptian dialect had phonations that was not present in Greek, so they made it up. So essentially now, the language of education for the first 200 years was Greek. The language of writing and studying was Greek. If you want to write or study, you study Greek. If you want to talk, you talk Coptic. So what he did, he accepted an experiment of talking Coptic and writing Coptic. So people started to write what they talk about. So not only that, it was so simple that even different dialects, like Amharic, rural dialect, urban dialect, Sahidic dialect, regional dialect, they were different. So it was so easy. You just write the letters. So you are Jamil and you are Gamil. So there is J and there is G, so you can write it different ways, you know? So even the dialects were written in the new Coptic language, adopted from Greek letters. And once this happened, the education in Egypt prospered because translation was like unbelievable. Everything is translated into the new language, which is a Coptic language. Now we call it the Coptic language. The original Coptic language was the Pharaoh, like a modification of the Pharaoh drawing. But new Coptic language written in Greek letters. So if you see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the fifth dot, you see Sahidic dialect. What's Sahidic dialect? You know? So I just want to make it interesting so you know what you're reading. What's Sahidic? Saidi. That's what it is. Upper Egypt, yeah. Yeah, Sahidic. So Saidi is not Saidi, it's Sahidi. So this is Upper Egypt. Okay. I'm just trying to make it interesting. So by the end of the 3rd century, the Coptic language was widely used throughout Egypt in preference of Greek. So it became the written language. Now the Great Persecution, I have 5 more minutes. The Great Persecution, it was at the dawn of the 1st century. Emperor Diocletian decreed the Great Persecution for Egypt and Syria. More focus was on Egypt. St. Peter was the bishop who was martyred, and he reigned only from 300 to 311, and he prayed to God that he is going to deliver his soul to martyrdom, but he asked God to make himself the seal of all torture and at the end of all torture. And it happened. When St. Peter died, it was about the end of the torture in the year 311, the end of the Great Persecution. And I think in some of the readings I have, I think because he presented himself anonymously and he ended up dying, it caught the attention of the people that the Egyptian bishop was martyred, and people started to, like the government at that time, started to pay attention to what they are doing. And then at that time, the torture did not take a lot of steam, and there's a lot of, like, everything goes this way and then comes that way. So it was coming that way anyway. And God gave him his wish that he would be the seal of martyrdom. Coptic laity from then on started to call their kids with the names of the martyrs, and they called the celebration of their day of martyrdom, they called it the Day of Perfection, which is a beautiful name, when they were really perfected, when they received the crown of martyrdom. And St. Peter was called, with all the ages, not only in our church, for all the churches in the world, the seal of martyrs. Something interesting about the Great Persecution and the Nairuz. Listen to this because this is really interesting. Church dedicated the first 2 weeks of the Coptic year. They call it Nairuz, but it's called, the real wording for it is Nairus. Nayrus. September 11, the beginning of the month of Tut, which is Tut 1. Tut Baba Hatur. So Tut 1 is the beginning of the Coptic year. Nairus is from the Boharic name of the new year. This is the new year. The translation is Nairus. However, the Persian people, there was a Persian feast by the name of Nowruz. And they, because Persian language is very close to the Arabic, the Nowruz was a Persian feast, so they thought we are celebrating their feast. So the language got mixed after that, and we call it the Nairuz. Nayruz. But the real name of the feast of Nair is Nairus, which is the translation of the new year. Okay? The Coptic year, 284 AD, is not the end of the persecution. It is the year where Diocletian was ordained, or not ordained, it was assigned as an emperor. Because this, they call it, this is the dark age of Christianity in the Alexandrian Church. So the year of his reign, beginning of his reign, was the beginning of the Coptic year, 284 AD. Those things I did not know. Some of the things that I did not know myself. I thought that the beginning of the Coptic year is the end of martyrdom. No, it was actually the beginning of the black or the dark age of Diocletian. In the Julian calendar, the first day of Anna Martyrum, the year of martyrdom, the year of martyrs, Anno Martyrdom, is the 29th of August, year 284, in the Julian calendar. Okay. Probably, you know, do you want me to do three other slides and finish the lecture? How's your time? I can stop here. Okay? So, before I end, I'm going to go to the set of questions that I'm going to send to Daniel. And then I have 13 questions that I'll send it to everyone. And there is a challenging question at the end. And if you solve that question, it means that you listened to the lecture. And you really listened. I did not give the answer in the lecture directly because I don't know why. Because probably that's me. I want you to focus on the lecture more. If I give it to you directly, then it's going to be easy. That's a challenging question, but other questions are completely direct. It's right out of the lecture. And as I said, I'm preparing a handout or a syllabus to combine all the resources together for the history of the church. Any question? You can send a text to the lecture is ended, and give him the website, please. The link again. Yeah. 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 The link is in all the texts. In all the texts. Every text I send it to the servants, I have the link. Okay. Yes, please. You can end it now.